Snowflakes swirled in the bitter wind as Jack locked the door of the small gas station where he'd just finished his second shift that day. His hands were numb, his stomach growled, and all he could think about was getting home to Lily. Inside their tiny rented house, the warmth from the old space heater barely chased away the chill, but it was enough. Jack tucked his 7-year-old daughter into bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sleep tight, bug," he whispered, kissing her forehead. He had just settled into his worn armchair when a faint knock broke the stillness. Jack froze. At this hour? He opened the door to find a young woman standing there, her thin coat dusted with snow, cheeks red from the cold. She looked barely out of her 20s, and her eyes carried a mix of fear and exhaustion. "My car, it broke down a few miles back," she said, her voice trembling. "My phone died. I didn't know where else to go." Jack's first instinct was caution. Money was tight, and Lily was sleeping in the next room. Letting a stranger in could be risky. But then he noticed her fingers shaking so hard she could barely hold her bag, the way her breath came in sharp clouds in the air. Without another word, he stepped aside. "Come in. You'll freeze out there." She hesitated, then stepped into the dimly lit living room. Jack shut the door behind her, sealing out the cold, unaware that this single choice would change his life forever. Jack ladled the last of the leftover soup into 2 mismatched bowls, setting one in front of the young woman and the other at his own spot. "Sorry," he said quietly, almost apologetically, "this is all I've got." Steam curled up between them, carrying the faint scent of vegetables and broth. She wrapped her hands around the warm bowl, smiling as if it were a feast. "It's perfect," she said softly, taking a slow sip. "Warmest meal I've had in days." From the doorway, Lily shuffled in, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, who's that?" she asked, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit. Jack introduced her, and the girl's face lit up. "I'm Emily," she said warmly. Lily's shyness lasted only seconds before she ran off and returned with a handful of crayon drawings, spreading them across the table like treasures. Emily leaned forward, studying each one with genuine interest, asking questions and laughing at Lily's imaginative details. Jack watched quietly, a bittersweet ache in his chest. His late wife had always said, "Kindness is never wasted." He felt her words echo now, in the way this stranger's laughter filled their little home, pushing the cold and silence away. They talked for hours, about nothing and everything, until the clock crept past midnight. Emily seemed almost reluctant to go to bed, and Jack found himself glad she was there. For one night, the weight of overdue bills, long hours, and uncertainty didn't feel so heavy. And though he didn't know why, he felt a strange sense of peace settle over them all. Morning sunlight spilled weakly through the thin curtains, painting the kitchen in pale gold. Jack stirred a cup of coffee, the quiet of the house unusual after the warm chatter of the night before. He expected Emily to join him soon, but when he peeked into the small guest room, the bed was neatly made. She was gone. On the kitchen table lay a single folded note, held down by an empty mug. Jack picked it up, his brow furrowing. In neat handwriting, it read, "You've given me more than you know. Thank you." There was no phone number, no address, just those words. He stood there for a long moment, the sound of the heater humming in the background. Lily wandered in, yawning, her hair sticking out in every direction. "Where's Emily?" she asked, still half asleep. "She had to leave early," Jack said, forcing a smile. "But she said thank you." They ate breakfast in the usual way. Toast for Lily, coffee for him. By noon, Jack was back at the gas station, the smell of motor oil and coffee replacing the faint memory of Emily's perfume. Life moved on as it always did, customers came and went, bills waited to be paid, and the cold seeped in through the cracks. Still, every so often, he found himself thinking about the young woman in the thin coat, wondering where she had gone, and why it felt like her brief visit had left something warm behind that no winter wind could touch. A week later, the day was gray and still when Jack heard the low purr of an engine outside his house. He glanced through the window and froze. A sleek black car, polished to a mirror shine, was parked by the curb. It looked absurdly out of place on his worn street of aging trucks and rusted sedans. The rear door opened, and Emily stepped out. But this wasn't the shivering girl in a thin coat he remembered. She wore a tailored winter jacket, her hair neatly styled, a quiet confidence in her stride. A driver in a crisp suit waited by the car as she walked up the path. Jack opened the door before she could knock. "Emily?" he asked, startled. She smiled, but there was something softer in her eyes. "I owe you an explanation," she said. Inside, Lily lit up the moment she saw her, running into her arms without hesitation. They sat at the same kitchen table where they'd shared soup just days earlier. Emily took a breath. "My name is Emily Carter. My father owns Carter Enterprises." Jack blinked, recognizing the name instantly, one of the biggest companies in the state. She explained how she'd been traveling without money or identity, searching for genuine kindness in a world where most people treated her differently because of her family name. "You didn't know me, yet you opened your door. You shared what little you had. That changed something in me," she said, her voice breaking just slightly. Jack didn't know what to say, only that the room suddenly felt warmer. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a large envelope, sliding it across the table toward Jack. "This is for you," she said. He hesitated, brow furrowed, but she urged him to open it. Inside was a crisp legal document, Jack's name printed in bold at the top. It took a moment for the words to sink in, a deed to a small but beautiful house on the edge of town, fully paid for. No rent, no mortgage, just theirs. Jack's throat tightened. I can't accept this," he stammered, pushing it back toward her. Emily's eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "You didn't let me in that night for anything in return. That's exactly why you deserve it." She glanced at Lily, who was now flipping through the crayon drawings she'd once proudly shown her. "Every child deserves to grow up without fear of losing their home." Jack looked at Lily, then back at Emily. He felt his chest ache with a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and relief. Slowly, he closed the envelope, holding it like something fragile. "Thank you," he whispered, the words barely escaping. They stepped outside together. The winter sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the street. Jack knelt to hug Lily, holding her close as the cold air nipped at their cheeks. For the first time in years, he felt lighter, like the weight of the world had shifted off his shoulders. Sometimes, he realized, one act of kindness really can change everything.